Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this Blitz chess postmortem, a postmortem of my Blitz game number 382. My opponent played e4 and I decided to go for the French defense, so the first couple moves we get are pretty usual. And then my opponent goes for the somewhat rare exchange variation. It's not a bad way to play, but it's not a huge advantage to white. So usually white players play a little differently, just trying to get more of an edge, but this is a reasonable way to play. And then typical ways to follow up are knight f3 and bishop d3, just getting on with developing your pieces. My opponent plays the third most popular move here, c4, which really I've never seen before. And now knight f6 is a perfectly good reply. A lot of times in these queen's gambit decline positions, you don't want to play knight f6, because after the exchange, the knight comes to d5, and then it gets kicked away by the e-pawn. But the difference here is there is no e-pawn, so you got to pay attention to these subtleties, which I wasn't paying attention to. And so that makes knight f6 a good move in this case, whereas it's not in the other cases. So I didn't really notice this. I just played c6 and went for a Slav type of setup, which I'm familiar with. And so we get some normal development. I brought the bishop out to b4, active post for it, although maybe bishop to e7 would have been a little more prudent. But anyway, playing actively is not too bad here. He goes bishop d3, and we're pretty much out of the opening book. We're down to a single game. So let's just look at this tab. I castle here. My opponent castles. And then I take, forcing him to move his bishop a second time and giving him an isolated queen's pawn that I hope to get some play against. But you see that white still has a fine position here. He's got good development and active pieces, and I still need to get these pieces out. So I get to work on this. Bishop g4 is recommended here as a better move than what I played, bishop f5. Yeah, I wasn't sure about bishop g4. I thought I would just get harassed there, but yeah, this is okay too, I guess. He goes bishop to g5. Kicking or pinning my knight, and now I go knight bd7. Cancel that. Did I play something else first? Oh, I played h6 first, kicking the bishop back. And then knight bd7, defending the knight, so my queen is free to move. And he plays the interesting move here, queen b3. I guess he could keep a little edge here by playing rook e1. But it's more or less even after this, so I've done okay in the opening. But a5 maybe is a little stronger way to play than what I played. I decided to exchange here. I mean, I have to do something about the bishop. And after a5, I was thinking he could play a3. Then I take. And then b5. Okay, so actually it's similar to the game, except black has gained a little bit of time. So I went for the immediate exchange. He took back. And then I played b6, and actually b5 would be a little bit better, kicking the bishop off of this diagonal. The c-pawn is not really going to be a weakness, even though it's a backwards pawn. It's shielded by white's c-pawn, so after b5 I should really have a fine position. I played b6. It's still okay, but yeah, it's not the best move here. Gives my opponent another tempo. He makes a developing move, and I place my queen to c7, where it's subject to harassment. My opponent immediately plays bishop g3. Yeah, and these last couple moves have landed me in a little bit of trouble. And I guess I keep making it worse. I could just go back to d8 where I came from, or I could drop down to c8. I went over here to b7. And it looks like this is not the best move. But he plays knight e5. And so I'm still in the game here. Let's look at this exchange. Cancel that. And we took back with the bishop. Yeah, let's back up. Instead of knight e5, he had the interesting move bishop d6. I guess this is the way we both overlooked this. This is the way for white to get a real advantage. Bishop d6 harasses my rook. And when the rook moves away, this battery is effective. So that's why this move b5 would have been important. If I had played that earlier, I would have kicked the bishop off of this diagonal. Wouldn't have to be worrying about the battery. And moves like bishop d6 wouldn't be such a threat. So this is just winning material for white. So when he played knight e5, that was a mistake. So I get to exchange, and well, so white has the opening edge, but it's not so huge. Rook a to d8, get my pieces out, And he takes on f6. Yeah, it was a bit of an oversight. I should have probably done something about this threat to take my knight and mess up my pawns, because I was struggling after that. What is the engine? The engine suggests, yeah, just queen back to e7, holding on to the knight, so if he exchanges it, I can take back with the queen. So rook a to d8, that's probably a move I played too quickly. And now my king side is all messed up, and black has something to play for here. And let's see, we both have the same colored bishop, so nothing else going on. It's even material, and black just has a better pawn structure. So let's see if he can exploit this. Sometimes, it's not so easy to take advantage of it, but he plays in a very logical way, gets his rook on the open line towards my king, and now threatens to win my bishop. Let's see, didn't like that. Likes king h7 better here. h5, yeah, I wanted to stop the pawn from coming in. And I need to do something about the threat of pawn to h5 winning my bishop. That's the main problem here. So king h7 just gets out of the way, and if he plays h5, I guess my bishop can move. Oh, can take the pawn. So that's a better way than h5. Okay, f4, and now my king really needs to move out of the way. I play this tricky move, queen c7. So if he attacks my bishop, I can take his rook. He just brings his other rook into the game. Okay, so I'm managing to hold on here. Okay, where do I get into trouble? Right here. Yeah, because pretty shortly I lose the exchange, and it's this move right here. So queen e7 once again. Yeah, I didn't like this constant threat against the bishop. Queen e7, is he threatening to... and let's check this out. This is interesting. Queen e7. If he pushes the pawn forward, I just drop back to h7, and there's an open file against my king, but I guess he can't really do much about it. I always have the idea of bringing the rook over to block the file, among other things. Yeah. Okay, so I had this idea of playing my bishop to f5 so I could use my bishop to block the g file, which would be a good idea, but it fails tactically to this move bishop d3. Yeah, if my rook moves away, my bishop is just loose there. So this is just a pure tactical oversight, this bishop f5 move. I should have noticed that I was running into the skewer and not played it. So another move was probably played with insufficient review. So my opponent really gets the advantage here, and I think from this point forward he maintains it. This is a long game, so let's go forward a few moves here. And he's playing reasonably well and keeping the edge and even building it. You see his advantages increasing here. So we trade all the material off, and he has a winning endgame with a rook against a bishop. And if we count the pawns, yeah, the pawns are even. And actually, my pawns are a little bit more together. But the rook is just a better piece in the endgame. It covers all the squares, whereas the bishop can only hit the light squares. The bishop at the moment is hemmed in by my own pawns. And so he should be able to mop this up pretty quickly. So I try to get my king into the game. He brings his king over. I think it would be better and more important for him to activate his rook at this position. Is the engine? Yeah, the engine gives king f2 or rook f4 or king h2. Yeah. So he's keeping the advantage and brings his king to the center. I try to activate my bishop. I got it out of this square here where it wasn't doing anything. And so he's pushing his pawns forward. But he's not using his rook in the best way. His rook is sitting back here, and he really should be activating it. One plan, for example, is to come up to this file and just start attacking pawns from the front. He can't really make a lot of headway against this pawn. It's well defended by the king. Another idea might be to get his king out of the way and bring his rook on this file and try and chase my king off of this good square that it's on. Yeah, not so easy to arrange. But you can see by the material advantage here that, by the computer evaluation, I mean, that white should be winning this pretty easily. Okay, so now he activates his rook. I just kind of am moving my bishop around looking for a plan. And he pushes some pawns forward. That's the other way to win, is to exchange down to an endgame where there's nothing but a bishop versus the rook. Well, that's a drawn endgame. He needs to at least a pawn. He needs say a rook and pawn against bishop and pawn, and then sacrifice the rook for bishop and pawn and win with the other pawn. That's one winning strategy here. So we start trading off pawns here, and I'm hoping to get rid of all the pawns. If I get rid of all the pawns, I can get into a drawn bishop and pawn endgame. But he's still winning this right up until this move right here. So he played king e3. I played king e3. And he played rook to g5. So most moves are now no longer winning, because I have a big threat here. And the threat is just to queen this pawn. I've got a pass pawn, he's got a pass pawn. If it turns into a race, if he just pushes a pawn, both sides will queen. No, my bishop's actually guarding the queening square, so I have an advantage in the race, actually. So black at this point, he's still winning, but he has to play very carefully, and there's only one move that maintains the winning edge here, which is rook g3. He's got to harass my king and activate his rook and make sure that my pawn doesn't queen. So he plays this move, rook to g5, hitting the pawn, and now black has the advantage. Look at the evaluation shift change there. So I start pushing my pawn, and I think he just miscalculated a little something here, because there's no way to stop the pawn now. The rook is cut off. Can't go back down to the back rank. Can't come over and check my king and get to the back rank. He tried rook h8. I push the pawn, and now he gets behind the pawn. But this interruption tactic is very important. You put your bishop here to interference. This interference tactic, you interfere with the attack of the rook here. So he has a few checks, but cancel that. My king went here, I guess. But after that, my king goes to safety. There's no more checks, and he's still not in time to get back and stop the pawn from queening. My bishop is covering that square, but even if the bishop hadn't been covering that square, my king, I would have put my king on c2 to cover that square. So there was just no way his rook was getting to the back rank in this kind of situation. So rook f8 he tried, and I get the queen, and then it's pretty easy to win the game from here. Deliver some checks, pick up his pawn, and in this position he resigned. So interesting game, exciting kind of turnaround there in the end game, and you got to watch out for those passed pawns. That's the moral of that one. If your opponent's got a passed pawn, you've got to make very, very sure your plan to stop it is going to be in time, or that you will be able to queen first. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.